Hey, this is Laura May with Christian Casting, answering one of the most frequently asked questions that I get. How do I get an agent? Don't I need an agent? That answer is multifaceted, as is every other question that we've been asking in this series, but I'm here to break it down for you a little bit so that you can know what to expect, both if you have an agent and if you don't. So, finding a Christian talent agent is no easy task. We have hundreds, if not thousands of talent agents all across the United States. And as we discussed in another video, there's simply not enough demand right now for faith-based content to be offering all of those who desire to be in faith-based projects full-time or even part-time work. That tide is shifting, and I truly believe that God is setting the stage with the recent success of so many faith-based films in the theaters. I really believe that things are changing and that the culture is gaining a climate that is much more ready to accept faith-based film, and will hopefully increase funding, and then will increase across the board opportunities for everyone. Now, we had also talked in another video about why certain times agencies receive breakdowns that are never posted publicly. And that's simply because if you have an agent, you have already gone through that disciplinary work of creating yourself, branding yourself as an actor, getting the education and the experience that you need, putting yourself through classes, getting a good headshot and a resume and a reel, and you then go to that agent who says, hey, I love all of these pieces, I have a fit for you here in my agency, and they'll then sign you. You know, the funny thing is, they'll receive breakdowns for these big projects, but a lot of people that I work with who actually have agents or have Christian agents, which is the one thing that every Christian actor seems to want, everyone I meet, I'm telling you, almost every single person, I cannot think of one who doesn't, says, I want to be signed with a Christian agent. And that's because culturally speaking, that seems to be the next natural step. And while that can be the case, so many people that I know who are assigned with agents are actually booking work on their own because they're self-submitting for things. They're on those websites that we talked about earlier. They are on casting networks, they are on Actors Access, they are on Backstage.com, they are on faithbasedcasting.com, they are on all these websites looking for jobs, continuously putting themselves out there. Half of these projects their agents don't even know about. So, do you need to have an agent to work? No, you do not. If you are wanting to work on projects like Overcomer, if you're wanting to work with the Kendrick brothers or with, actually, we'll go back to that. If you're wanting to work with the Irwin brothers who did I Can Only Imagine, and your sights are set on these big budget Hollywood blockbuster faith films, then chances are good, yes, you do need an agent, and probably a Christian agent is going to be the one who is more lent toward receiving the breakdowns for those films. So if you say, well, I need an agent, I want an agent, I will not be satisfied until I have a Christian agent, then let me encourage you to have certain pieces in place. Jean Wenger with Treasure Coast Talent she manages many of the most familiar faces in Christian film that you would know. People like Shannon Fields from Facing the Giant, people like Cameron Arnett from Overcomer, people like, well, I'll tell you what, go to her website. That's your homework for this video. Go to her website at treasurecoasttalent.com. I want you to see some of the other faces, many that you will recognize from film, and you say, well, how could I get her to represent me? Well, her first step is you need to have an IMDb page in place before she will even consider looking at you. Why is that? Because she represents the best of the best. If you are serious, you will be putting the pieces to your actor tool belt in place. One of those for her is an IMDb page. It is a reel. And we've talked in other videos, what if I don't have a reel? There is no excuse. There are monologues out there. There are phones that can create quality video out there. There is no excuse to not have some sort of sample of your acting ability. She prefers if you have a website. Do you have a website launched yet? You can go to Wix.com or GoDaddy. There are a million free web building sites out there that you can get a simple site built. And if you want to, say, just put a photo on the landing page and then say, my name is John Smith, actor, or my name is Jessica Jones, actress, and you have a link to your resume, and you have a link to your reel, and maybe that's all that's on your website right now. That's perfect. what they want to see, what any reputable agent is going to want to see, is that you have taken the steps to put those pieces in place. So, an IMDb page. There are tons of how-to videos. If you don't know how, just do a Google search and you can find videos and articles about how to launch one of those pages. There's a paid service and there's an unpaid service. You don't necessarily need to have IMDb Pro if you're just starting out. Look at the differences between a free page and the Pro, and you'll find that for most of you, if you're just starting out, the free version is just fine. You want to have your reel prepared. You want to have a website, if at all possible. And I might ask you, if you say that it's not possible, I might ask you to reconsider why and to revisit that idea again. You also want to have your headshot available. So those are 4 things that you want to have in place before you even anticipate trying to have an agent. Do you have a headshot, a reel, a resume, and an IMDb page? Headshot, resume, reel, IMDb page, and a website. Those 5 things. Do you have those in place? And as God would have it, I am meeting more and more Christian talent agents, and I'm really excited to share with you guys all across the country who those are and how you can get in touch with them. But I will tell you that out of respect for their position, I will not bring to them any talent that does not have those pieces in place already. Because those folks who are serious about investing in themselves and in the calling that God has given them, they will be adamant about putting those pieces in place. Like we talked about on the other video, you wouldn't show up to a ball game without a glove. You just wouldn't. And it doesn't matter how gifted you are. Please don't show up to a talent agency expecting them to sign you if you have not put those very simple pieces into place. And they are actually very simple. If you don't know how to do it, find a friend. If you're on Facebook, put up a post. Hey, I need somebody who can help me build a free website. Very simple. And I guarantee if you're putting yourself out there and if you are taking those steps forward, here we go again with the loaves and the fishes. If you are providing what you can do, God will meet you there. I was talking with Cameron Arnett of Overcomer just recently on our last film set. And, someone from Christian Casting had asked him, well, hey, how do I advance? How do I become a producer? How do I get a production company like you have? And he says, they're not going to necessarily like the answer that I have, because the first thing that comes to my mind and heart is, unless the Lord builds the house, they that build it labor in vain. He said, I feel like if you continue to give God the best where you are, and you continue to use the pieces that you have in place right where you are, God will then advance you to the next level. But if you don't utilize what He's given you right here, right now, then you have no business asking God for the next level up, because you haven't been faithful with the little that you have. And He says, if you are faithful with little, I will give you more. I will put you in charge over much. But it's continuing to be faithful in those moments, in those seasons of little, investing what you have, and then watching God return and continue to invest. So if you look at Cameron's story, it's incredible about how he was in Hollywood 20 years ago. And you saw him on Star Trek, Miami Vice, so many of these other projects. And then he stepped away for, I believe, 20 years. And then came to a moment with God and said, if you want me back in, you need to put me back in. But he already had those pieces in place. He was surrendering and saying, God, I've been a pastor, I've been a teacher, I've been a father. And if you would have me go back into this again, God led, then you show the way. And you now probably saw him in the Kendrick brothers' last film, Overcomer. And incredible, incredible story. You can look that up and just look up Cameron Arnett in the news, and you guys will be able to find an immense amount of articles just based on his story and how God so much led both his going into the industry, his coming out of the industry when God said to come out, and then the gift of being put back in. And when he was put back in, that was without an agent. He has one now, but God put him back in the game without an agent. So you'll hear me say over and over, your story isn't supposed to look the same. So trust God with this and say, God, do you want me to have an agent? And if so, please lead the way, but show me what I need to do today in order to then see those steps roll out to land with an agent in the future. So let me talk to you quickly about the Kendrick brothers, because a common was going to say misconception, but it's not necessarily that. A common belief is that if you want to be in Christian films, the only entry point, like for salvation, it is Jesus. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And for faith films, it is the Kendrick brothers. And I say that a little bit flippantly, but that seems to be sort of just as much as Jesus is the way to salvation. The Kendrick brothers are the way to Christian film. And that's just not true. I'm here to tell you that you can rejoice if you are never cast in a Kendrick brothers films. And in fact, they do not do open casting. I had someone offer to pay me to please pitch their project to the Kendrick brothers. I said, they don't. They just do not do that. If you go to their website and go to their frequently asked questions, do you listen to project pitches? They do not. They believe that God has called them, those brothers, to do these projects in His time and in His anointing, and they have already got so many stories birthed in and of themselves that they don't entertain outside projects. And that's okay, and that's not bad news for the rest of us. The great news is that God has used the Kendrick brothers to really change the face of Christian film, and that in doing so, people like the Kendrick brothers, people like the Irwin brothers, they are helping set the stage. People like Dallas Jenkins with The Chosen are helping to flip a lot of opportunities that previously would have never been available to Christian artists, Christian stories, and Christian filmmakers. Now that's being not only acknowledged, but it's being entertained and it's being embraced. And you have people who aren't even Christians trying to make faith films. If you saw Noah and the Transformer style, whatever they were at the end of that biblical film, you'll see what happens when non-Christians try to make Christian stories. It doesn't work. There was no theological consultation before the ending of Noah. And if you didn't see it, just take my word for it. Or YouTube, Noah, the story, or Noah, the movie. A little crazy, but just know that God, I believe, really is giving new opportunity, new life to Christian storytellers. I want to remind you that Jesus Himself was a storyteller. And if that doesn't make your insides burst over with new joy, I don't know what would. Because the very thing that God has called you to be is what Jesus incarnate was. He was a storyteller. He loved to take spiritual truths that couldn't be understood in perhaps different words and to put them into parables. We know a parable as an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. And God knew that certain things, certain truths, theological giants of belief and foundation and things that would make our very core for Christianity couldn't necessarily be explained for what they were. So He had to tell stories to try to illustrate the truth, this unknowable truth that an unknowing God was trying to present to a very finite people. And He did it through storytelling. And it's fascinating that you and I in this day and age are also called to be storytellers. So think about when Jesus chose His fellow storytellers. He chose men that had no business. They were fishermen. It was a tax collector. They were carpenters. They were ruddy, uneducated men who had no business necessarily being next to the storyteller of all time, and yet they were. And it's because God chose them for this journey. And their path didn't look like any other path. The Pharisees thought they had the path figured out. You grow up, very legalistically in the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and they followed every rule to the letter. And to them, that's what Christianity ought to look like. That's what serving the Savior looked like. And Jesus destroyed the system when He came and He was eating with the publican sinners, and He was calling to serve with Him the most unexpected, the least of those in that day. And so when we go back to, well, do I need an agent? This all ties together because the same Jesus that came and served on earth is the same Jesus that we serve now. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so when I look at how God functioned here on earth incarnate, and then I think, okay, so He left us a Holy Spirit, but He didn't change. So when I look now at my journey in the entertainment industry, and I ask myself, well, what is it that I need to have in place? What kind of things do I have to do? There are certain things, like we've said, that the world requires that you have in place out of respect for the industry. I wouldn't try to get into woodworking without the tools. Wouldn't try to play sports without the glove. I wouldn't, right? We've already talked about this. But also know that the Jesus you serve can do completely unprecedented things. And while it might seem as though if I get an agent, the world will open up to me, I can't tell you how many people that have agents come to me and say, Laura, where do you find these breakdowns? Because my agent doesn't even, you're helping me find just as many through Christian Casting, and you guys are posting publicly just as many castings as my agent is able to get for me. How do you find them? And it's God. It's God-led. God is bringing people to the Christian Casting family. He is networking me with other people so that we begin to bring you guys more opportunities to get involved. And it really is a God-led experience. It's a God-led journey. And it has to be that way if we say that we're doing it for Him. So if you are to pursue an agent, please make sure, out of respect for their position and out of respect for this industry, for those who have already done their due diligence and those people who are vying for audition opportunities with that agent, make sure that you have your stuff in place because there's no excuse not to. But also know that if it's God Himself who has that for you, that the way will seem clear and the doors will open. And if the doors don't open, don't get discouraged because that means God has a different path for you, that He's a different way, perhaps to the same destination. And I have other stories I could tell you, and I won't for sake of time on this video, but just know and believe that this journey is God ordained, or rather it ought to be, and that an agent might be a part of your plan and it might not. And if you are not going to pursue an agent, or perhaps you have pursued one and God has not given you one yet, I want you to go to all those websites and be your own manager, be your own best supporter, be your own best videographer, and get in there, get the pieces in place, because I don't believe in overnight success. I believe that success is when preparation meets opportunity, because I think too many people have the opportunity come by, perhaps even to be represented by an agent, and they had not prepared. So when preparation meets opportunity and the two of those come together and you've already done all the legwork that it takes that God would require. David had to go pick up his own stones. And did you notice he only flung one, but he picked up 5? And I think that speaks volumes to us, because if I had to get into the mind of a young man named David and he's about to fight a giant and he's picking up stones to do so, he might have had in his mind, well, I'm not sure one is going to do it. So I'll go ahead and just grab a few of them and I'll be ready. And if the first one doesn't do it, I'll have another one and another and another and another. And I think that that speaks so loudly to his journey to the kingdom, the type of person that he was. He believed so desperately in God that he already knew the victory was theirs, but he didn't know how much God was going to require of him. So what he did is he said, well, I'll make sure. I know, he says, if you look at David's speech to Goliath, he basically says, listen, you're coming up against the God of Israel, and that's who I serve. So I'm not scared. The victory is already ours because the victory is already God's. So by default, I'm part of that victory. So when he went and picked up 5 stones, he was simply trying to make sure that he did his part, but knowing that the victory was the Lord's. So as you prepare for an agent, as you're seeking one and praying about whether or not you could get one, make sure that you pick up all those stones and be certain that when the opportunity does come by, if God brings it by, because you don't know if it's going to be today or 10 years from now, make sure that you have used your time wisely, use your resources wisely, and pick up those stones so that you know you are ready, that when the opportunity comes, you have already done the preparation that it takes. And if God has an agent for you, great. And if He doesn't, great, because He will allow the path that you've had, He will put those steps in order if you surrender them to Him. So, do you need an agent? I don't know, but God does. And He has already got it all figured out. So invest the talents that you have, put those pieces in place, and surrender it to God. See where this path might bring you. This is Laura May with Christian Casting. I hope you enjoyed.